So welcome everyone. This is our 8th version of Ask the Expert, and today we are joined by the serious, awesome Jason Goldberg. And just to kind of let you into how do I know this incredible guy? Well, lockdown was the reason why. So I joined up to a program called Creating Transformations Online with Mindvalley and Evercoach. And that was the first time I'd ever laid eyes on this guy. And he has transformed me. So I resisted digital, I resisted having anything online. And the reason why is because I never got it. Doing a 40-day program with you has been the most mind-blowing experience ever. So I just wanted to say that because you've made my world rock in more ways than I can say. So yeah, Jason, you're incredible. And I just wanted to say that before I forgot to say it later.
Thank you, Lily. That's very sweet. I didn't do anything. You did the work. If you just watched the videos and didn't do anything with it, then you would not have had that experience. So I appreciate you for actually putting in the work.
It was incredible. Just the way it was structured was my perfect learning style. And you know, people have said to me, how have you done it? And I've said, with Jason, because it is true. So anyway, without further ado, Jason, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wealth of experience and knowledge and expertise. So what we're going to do is just, if you could just give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and kind of how you've got to where you've got. I've read not all of your book because I haven't had the chance, but I've read.
You haven't read. I'm out. I'm done. I'm finished. We're finished now.
So, but there is massive links in there to things like The Baby Assassin, and people have been going, Lorraine, what are you talking about? So your book, Prison Break, absolutely. You know what I've read so far, it is mind blowing in itself. You've obviously done TEDx. But I'm not going to steal your thunder. I want you to share your
story. You're doing a great job. Keep going. You're doing. My Jewish mother will be so proud to hear you talk about me this way. This is fantastic. You're doing awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, just so they know, you know, who are you and what do you do and how you can help them, because these sessions have been from a professional or personal perspective to either help grow them as an individual or their business. So I will let you take the show.
Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate you having me here. Thanks so much. Sorry again for the mix up of time stuff. We'll make it up. We'll make it up with quality, quality over quantity. So I always, it's always funny to me when people say like, introduce yourself. I'm like, I don't know, because like, I'm not what I do. Like the noun, the label on me is like coach or speaker or business mentor or whatever it is. But I would really hate to think that's who I am. So I guess for me, it's really just, I consider myself a joy activator. I go out in the world every day and just try to activate joy within other people. I don't care if I'm, in a social distance line at Starbucks, or if I'm coaching one of my clients, or if I'm, doing some kind of a talk. I just want to, in some way, shape, or form, my whole kind of life purpose, life mission, if you want to call it that, is to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than when I found them. And I know that if I'm doing that day in and day out, that whatever else I'm layering on top of that, whether it's coaching or speaking or being a cashier at a grocery store, that my life is going to be pretty much okay. And so that has taken the form of coaching and speaking and mentoring. So the primary work that I do now is either coaching entrepreneurs one-on-one. Typically, I don't do a whole lot of one-on-one stuff, but a few one-on-ones at a time. But primarily, it's working with groups of coaches to help them build their businesses online. And it's really transformation first business building. It's not about all strategies and tactics. It's about who you're being and how you're showing up in the world and kind of the perspective and the lens through which you see the world, which is why I wrote the book Prison Break, which is all about transitioning from moment by moment, transitioning from being a prisoner of circumstance where my happiness or my sadness or my fulfillment or my peace or my whatever is dictated or dependent upon something out there, some external circumstance, shifting from that prisoner of circumstance into a self-leader. And self-leaders just basically understand that they don't control the circumstances in their lives, and they don't even control their thoughts, but they do control the way they relate to their thoughts. They control whether or not they take their thoughts seriously, and how that has an impact for better or for worse on their experience of life. So that's kind of my spiel. I was in technology, corporate technology, for 15 years. I had a couple different startups after I left corporate. One was a really awesome, innovative technological transportation startup. The second one was in partnership with NASA and the Space Shuttle program here in the States to commercialize some of their technology to bring it out to the private sector. And then I got into coaching and speaking. I guess now was 2014, so six years, and it's been an incredible ride, and it's just been really fun to play with as many people as possible and help them, live their best life. If we're going for bumper stickers, is that a good start?
Oh, absolutely awesome. And I think one of the things that really stuck with me in the first couple of sessions on this creating transformations online actually was this whole turning serious into serene. And you've obviously got a program called Playful Prosperity. And when I was going through that program, I was quite a serious individual. And actually, I needed to have more fun. I needed to have more play. I needed to be more creative and not to take life so seriously. So those are awesome messages. Now, the other thing that you did, Jason, which was, a massive change for you in your life, was the weight loss that you had as well. So, I know in your book, you very much talk about the 21-day habit myth. Could you just expand a little bit on on obviously that journey for you before we kick off with the next question? Because I think that is quite a good thing to talk about.
Yeah. So I mean, the way that I got here and got to all this stuff is, and the reason I teach, for me, play is an interesting word. And sometimes I regret the fact that I use the word play, just because play has an immediate connotation for people that is not my meaning of play. It's not a bad meaning of play. It's great. Most people, when they think of play, they think of, like, if I say, I'm going to teach you how to be more playful, they're like, oh, cool. You're going to teach me to finger paint and dance in the rain and do funny voices and whatever else. And that's all great. To me, those are all examples of play. For me, that's not the play that I'm looking for. The play that I'm looking for is being able to play with my thoughts, play with the way I relate to the world, have a less serious and more casual relationship to the thoughts that are popping up in my head that don't even belong to me. I didn't create 99% of the thoughts that are in my head. They just pop up. Like when I wake up in the morning, I don't get to have some time in the morning where no thoughts are happening in my head. And then I say, okay, now I'm ready to start thinking. And then my brain starts going. I'm being thought. I'm not actually thinking, right? And so I know that left to my own devices, my default is to be very serious. My default is to take things too seriously, take myself too seriously. So I'm not this person where it's like my whole life I've just been like, oh, I don't take anything seriously. I'm just, bad thing happens. Oh, that's awesome. It's a gift from the universe. Like I am not that way at all by default, which is the exact reason that I needed to start doing this work for myself. It was completely selfish. It was for me. And then it came to a point where I realized that the possibilities of how life feels when you do learn a little more how to be a self-leader, a little more how to be playful with your thoughts and not take them so seriously, I noticed the implications in my own life, and I wanted to help other people do the same thing. So first and foremost, I do this work so I have reminders for myself. My book, I don't care if anybody ever reads it. It's for me to go back to when I get too serious. It's my own little journal that I happen to just make available for everybody else that wants to read it. So the reason I say all that as a preface is because, growing up my entire life, I was always the chunky kid. From the time I was probably first grade, which in the States here, first grade is about 6 years old, I was already the chunky kid. By the time I was 15 years old, I was 250 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilos, but 250 pounds. And that's at 15 when, kids are really loving and accepting and would never judge you based on your appearance or anything like that. So high school was hell. And I just always had, for my entire life, just so much stress and anxiety and so deep depression. I was on antidepressants from the time I was about 15 or 16 for about the better part of 15 years or so. And it was just kind of my default. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse to the point where when I was in my late 20s, I was in my last corporate IT job. I was making well over six figures in my 20s, and I was 332 pounds, which I do know is over 150 kilos. And so I was really a very, very large man. And it wasn't even just the appearance stuff. It was the fact that it was literally killing me. I mean, I was 40% body fat. I mean, I was really struggling a lot. And that just kind of led to more and more stress and anxiety and depression. I mean, you could find me more often than not in the mornings when I would get ready for work, when I had to wear, the button-down shirt and the slacks and the suit kind of stuff. I would be on the floor crying in the morning because my clothes felt so tight and I was so uncomfortable. And I couldn't bear the fact that I was going to go out in the world again and just feel completely worthless for an entire day. And so that was kind of my experience of life. So again, I say all that to say, this is not a thing where it's like, oh, well, he's just probably always been super happy and things have just always worked out his way. So of course it's easy to teach playfulness. It's the full opposite for me. I've had so many struggles that if I didn't take the time to intentionally develop these tools, I probably would have, this is no joke, I probably would have killed myself years ago. And so not to take it into a crazy serious turn, but I want people to recognize here that any prisoner type moments you've had, if you've been somebody who's been very reactive, if you've been somebody who has been physically overweight, if you've been somebody who is mentally overweight, because even when I lost 130 pounds, I hadn't really focused entirely on the inner stuff. So even though I had lost the physical weight, I was still carrying around the emotional weight, the mental weight, the financial weight, the all these other types of weight. So all of us are overweight in some way in our lives. And if that feels like you, that you feel overweight in some place, I just want you to know that there is a more effective way of approaching the things going on in your life. Does not mean you're going to do it 100% of the time. And if you think that that's the goal, I beg you to let go of that. The goal here for me is not immunity from this stuff, but it's navigation of this stuff. It's going to come up. I still have my serious moments. I still have my depressive days. I still have my sad periods. And the question is, how do you navigate that stuff so that you don't have to carry around as much suffering as if you didn't know how to navigate that stuff? So that's kind of my whole thing in the world, is how can I share my story, and how can I share the things that have worked for me in a way that hopefully it at least somewhat reduces, or best case scenario completely eliminates, the day-to-day suffering you're facing. And so that's kind of why I do what I do, and that's what I think is possible. I know I went on a total rant there. I do that sometimes, but I hope there was something there that was helpful for somebody.
I think the key is there though, isn't it, Jason? Because adversity, we all have faced adversity in life in some shape or form, and actually there's a huge lesson and a learn in those challenging times, because when we actually reflect back and we evaluate and then learn from it, we're able to then face other situations in a much more positive or proactive way. So actually, one of the things again that I read in your book was about, sometimes our goals are so big, that actually that creates anxiety or fear, and by breaking it down, it makes it more manageable. So absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Right, I'm going to open up for questions from everyone. Linus, I saw you pop your finger. So did you want to ask your question? Linus is from Singapore.
Linus was just dancing. He didn't have a question. He was just kind of like doing one of these and just trying to get... See, there you go.
Yeah. See? Actually, when I raised my hand just now, I didn't have a question, but I do have a question now that he finished talking. He finished sharing. Thanks for sharing, actually. And yes, I'm in Singapore, so it's actually a bit late. So I apologize if I was actually covering my face, because sometimes I might be I might be yawning, and that's mostly because it's close to 12 a.m. right now. So.
Oh wow! Yeah. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. I always enjoyed Lauren's Ask the Experts sessions. It's always been great. I've always tried to come as much as I can. So I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned about facing adversity and tough times, and I agree that it is it is important to have a bit of adversity in life as well. But one of the main challenges is, how do you because it sounds like you've been through a lot, but I also know there are people who often crumble through this adversity. So my question would be, what kind of suggestions would you give for people to build up this resilience towards in these tough times? Because it is not easy it is easy moment when you're facing a crisis or when you're facing difficult times. It's hard to call on the resilience or the strength of character in you. So what kind of what do you have any suggestions to how to just be able to build up this mental strength or this resilience in yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. So what we want to do is, whenever possible, or what I try to do whenever possible, is we want to practice on the smallest things possible, right? Because it's unrealistic to think that we overreact at the small things, and then somehow when something massive happens, we're just going to know exactly how to navigate that. And there's a really interesting phenomenon that happens in baseball. Is everybody familiar with like American baseball? Kind of, at least for the most part, you know what it looks like if you saw somebody. Do you know what a baseball bat looks like? A show of hands if you know what a baseball bat looks like. Okay, cool, awesome. And also now I know you're all real because you raised your hand. You're not like, this is how I figure out if there's real people here or they're all virtual reality. So if you watch Major League Baseball, the batter who is not up at bat yet, but they're the next person up at bat, they are in a position called on deck, meaning they're the next person to come up. They're waiting to come up. And what you will see if you watch any player who's on deck is that they have 5 baseball bats they're holding. So they're holding 5 baseball bats and they're swinging them around, right? They're just swinging them around while they're waiting. Does anybody have any idea why they swing around 5 baseball bats at once? No. Okay, so here's why. It's because when they're swinging around 5 baseball bats for a couple minutes while they're waiting, when it's their time to go up to bat and they drop 4 of the bats and they just have the one, that one feels ultra light to them. It feels so much lighter. So now when the ball's coming at them at 100 miles an hour, it's much easier to react quickly because that thing feels like a feather because they had the 5 bats to begin with. It trained their body. And so we want to do the same thing with adversity. We think like somebody cuts us off in traffic. What's the big deal to practice self-leadership there? It's okay. I got mad. I got pissed off. I yelled at the guy. That's not going to have any effect if I get fired from my job 2 days later. Of course it has an effect, because if we've never practiced it on the small things, how can we ever practice it on the bigger things? So that's the first thing, is to really recognize and really slow down with the small things that are happening. And it's a really incredible phenomenon that all of the suffering that we face, and this is, I'm very careful when I talk about this, because if we don't have the right context around what I'm about to say, then it's very easy to start blaming ourselves and shaming ourselves and judging ourselves, and that doesn't help anybody at all. But the thing that I want to say here is that all of our suffering comes from believing the thoughts that are in our head, right? We are living in the feeling of our thinking. And we know that to be true because if I told you right now, I want you to get angry, right? If I said, Kate, I want you to get super angry right now, you couldn't just like squint your face and get angry. You would have to think about thoughts that make you angry, right? You would think about something in the past that made you angry, and then your brain, which can't tell between the past and the present, gets angry, and you start feeling all the physical sensations. So if it's not our thoughts that are creating our feelings, what else could it possibly be? It's definitely our thinking. So some people will tell you, reframe your thinking. And there's nothing wrong with reframes. Reframes are great. It's a fantastic personal development tool. And to look at something and say, okay, that's one way that I could say it happened. Maybe this also could be true. That's great. Reframing is great, right? And reframing when you're at a low level of consciousness is something that your brain will not let happen. It's the analogy I use for that is, it would be like me taking ketchup and smearing it on my face and then trying to convince myself that it's blood. I know it's not blood. I just put it on my face myself. So when you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you go, they didn't cut me off. They liberated me from my speed. It doesn't work. Like, those kind of reframes don't work. So if you're feeling really down on yourself and you go, I'm a great person, I'm worthy, it doesn't land. And it's not that it's not well-intentioned, it's that you're not in the right place to hear those messages. So what we want to do first is we want to increase our level of consciousness. When we are in a low place, when something's going on in our lives that we don't want to have happen, our thinking takes us into a very low state of consciousness. And when and think about that word consciousness, don't think about it in a spiritual term. Think about it as in like sleeping. When you are asleep, you are literally unconscious. How much purposeful, intentional work can you do in the world when you are literally in your bed asleep? Not very much, right? But when you are conscious, when you wake up, then your senses are aligned, your senses are activated, and you start seeing what's really going on in the world, and then you can make decisions. The same thing happens here. When we're in a low state of mind, it's not just unrealistic to think that we can just snap out of it, but it's unfair to ourselves to think we can just snap out of it. We need to first focus on increasing our level of consciousness. And when we increase our level of consciousness, we see more opportunities to solve things. Byron Katie always says, a clear, calm mind knows exactly what to do next. So the reason I'm saying all this is to say, when something major is happening and you feel like, okay, I got to do something, I got to fix this, I got to whatever, I'm super stressed, I got to figure out a solution. That's the worst time to figure out a solution. The absolute worst time. One of my favorite quotes in the world is from Albert Einstein. He says, you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. You can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. So if the problem has you down here, low level of consciousness, you're not going to come up with a solution down here to fix that problem. We need to increase our level of consciousness. So how do we do that? There's a few ways to do that. First thing is to recognize that you are not your thoughts. Okay? It's impossible for you to be your thoughts. If your thoughts were actually a real thing, they would be pervasive, which means that if I put you under anesthesia, you would still be stressed out about the same things. But if I put you under anesthesia right now, all of your problems would disappear. Why would they disappear? Well, because you wouldn't be thinking about these thoughts over and over again and taking them seriously. So the first step here is to recognize when you are thinking, right? It has nothing to do with the content of your thought. Oh, I'm stressed out about money, or I'm stressed out about my partner, I'm stressed out about my kid. It doesn't matter the content of your thoughts. The first thing we want to recognize is we want to say, oh, okay, I'm doing that thing again where a thought pops in my head and I take it seriously. I'm doing that thing again where a thought popped in my head and I made it fact just because it's in my head. And I ask myself, it doesn't even matter if it's true. I ask myself, when I believe this thought in my head to be true, when I believe this thought that I'm going to get fired, when I believe this thought that my partner doesn't love me, when I believe this thought that my kid is an idiot and keeps getting, suspended from school for bringing porno magazines, when I believe all these things, how do I show up in the world? Do I feel creative? Do I feel expansive? Do I feel like I actually can handle the things in front of me? And typically the answer is no. And so I asked myself instead, okay, in this moment, and this is, you can look at Byron Katie's work. She's great at doing this stuff. In this moment, if I didn't take that thought so seriously, if I didn't take that thought as fact, in fact, if I couldn't even think that thought, if that thought didn't occur to me, how would I show up differently in this moment? And that changes everything. Because if I look at a situation and I say, I can't believe my girlfriend just said that to me. How dare she? What a rude thing to say. What a lack of thoughtfulness. She is such a mean person. If that is the thought that I'm taking seriously, then I have no choice but to react as if that thought is true, right? And now I'm going to how do I treat her when I believe that? How do I treat myself when I believe that? How do I treat our dynamic? How do I treat other people in my life when I believe that my girlfriend is doing something wrong and terrible? I know what that feels like. On the flip side, I ask myself, okay, looking at her in this moment while she's saying this thing, if I didn't have the thought that she's rude or mean, if I wasn't taking seriously the thought that she's rude or mean, what else might I see in this moment? If I really slow that down and I look at somebody who is in pain or yelling or screaming or upset, I can have compassion and say, shit, I know what it feels like to be so upset that I have to yell at somebody else. I know what it feels like, and it sucks to feel this way, that I am so feeling not in control of my life that I lash out at the person closest to me. I never want anybody to feel that way, and I have totally felt that way. And when I can look at it through that lens, my consciousness increases. It's no longer about me, and it's about me seeing how I can have compassion for the other person in front of me. So I know that's kind of a long diatribe, but I really want everybody here to get, and this is an ongoing practice, it's not something you get once and then you're done, but I want everybody to get that the sooner we recognize that our thoughts are just thoughts, they're not instructions, they're not truth, and that the extent to which we take those thoughts seriously maps our entire experience of life, the sooner we recognize that, then the sooner when we're in it, we go, oh, I call this having a Britney Spears moment. You go, oops, I did it again. Right? The thought popped in my head, I believe that, oops, I did it again. So that's kind of that's my more playful approach to dealing with things. And I hope that, Linus, I hope that's helpful. It's not about creating resilience beforehand, but it is about understanding how to navigate this with a little less seriousness, with a little less tight grip on the situation. You want to just kind of loosen your grip a little bit, have a slightly more gentle approach, more gentle hold on whatever's going on in your world, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That was a really, really great explanation there, Jason. And I think we spend so much time anticipating what might go wrong or what might happen. And therefore we're creating almost the thoughts based on what might have happened before, or just anticipating what we think might happen based on our own experience. So yeah, that was beautifully put. And I loved Brittany.
Yeah, and also remember this quote: economists have successfully predicted 27 of the last 2 recessions.
That sums it up. Yeah, because one of the other things as well, I think you wrote this, so I'm just going to read it. It says, in the midst of uncertainty and discomfort, we can each choose to get stressed out, get anxious, or shut down. Or we can actually choose to relax, be playful, and let our natural creative intelligence do its thing. And, very much I talk to my clients about this whole concept of freedom, choice, and love. And, we are in control, and I think, it's really important that actually people recognize that actually it's our mind, and we can have that choice of how we respond. So, we have that event plus our response equals the outcome. And it's very true that actually, your perfect example there around what the other person is doing, that external, that is out of your control, but your internal thoughts are in your control. And I think when people realize that, they're in such a better place, because we don't know what is below the surface. We don't know. Before people met you today, Jason, they could just see that 10% of how you showed up. They didn't know your backstory and the things that you've been through in your life. And so we make so many assumptions based on that. So thank you for that. So who's got the next question? To Natalie and then Kate. Okay.
I was just wondering, Jason, what was the catalyst? What was the moment that kind of changed your way of thinking?
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that question. Here's the funny thing about that. So I write about in Prison Break. The first chapter of the book is called "The Day the Universe Cut Me Off." That's the name of the chapter. And it's all centered around this one moment that like changed everything. But I was getting those moments my entire life. I just wasn't listening to them. I just like that. The alarm was going off. I just kept snoozing it. And so there was this one day in particular. Again, in my late 20s, at my last corporate job. 332 pounds, making really good money. So not having any issues with that kind of stuff, having all the external stuff that was supposed to make me happy. And as everybody will tell you, I love that Jim Carrey says he hopes everybody gets all the fame and money they've ever wanted so they can see it's still not going to make them happy. I really love that sentiment because it's so true, and you just can't convince anybody. They have to experience it themselves. But I was going through all that stuff, and I tried to make a purchase on Amazon. I'm a big sock lover. You caught me without socks for once, but typically I really love like funky socks. Like I have a whole collection of socks. I actually have too many socks. I think it's a problem. Like, they talk about cat ladies who have like 40 cat. I have like 170 cats in the form of socks. Anyways, so I tried to buy these socks on Amazon. It was like a $50 or $60 order of socks. I know, don't judge me. And I got the card got declined, right? It got declined for whatever reason. And so I was kind of upset. I didn't understand what was going on. I knew I had money in the account. And so I put the number in again, and again, it gets declined. And now I just blow up. I just get super pissed off. I have always had major anger problems historically growing up. I was the kid that would like punch holes in walls and chase people in traffic if they cut me off. And then I was such a wimp. Like if I caught them, I'd be like, oh shit, what do I do now? And I'd like try to get away. So like, it was just so, everything was so reactive. And so when my card got declined the second time, I exploded. And I threw my chair back and my desk in my office into the wall, and I storm out of my office, and I storm into the lobby of our business building, and I grab my phone and I call my bank, and I'm like mashing the 0 button to get a live person because I don't want to deal with all the automated bullshit. And I finally get this really sweet guy named Steven on the phone who just wants to help, and I'm like yelling at him and just being a total asshole. And so I'm really upset, and I'm asking, why is my card getting declined? I know there's money in the bank. And he says, well, Mr. Goldberg, looks like there were some potentially fraudulent activity on your account. And so we wanted to make sure that, somebody hadn't stolen your card. And so we cut it off for your protection, to which anybody on this call or anybody watching this live would be a normal human and say, thank you so much. I appreciate you protecting my money. Not me. What do you mean somebody? So I'm just yelling and screaming at this guy. And finally, I demand to know what these charges were that somebody put on my card. So he types away at his computer. He comes back and he says, Mr. Goldberg, it looks like there were 4 fast food transactions in one day. And so we assumed somebody had taken your card and they were making small purchases to test it before they went and made a bigger purchase. And of course, that wasn't stolen. I had eaten at 4 fast food restaurants in one day because that was the way I coped, right? I knew it was going to be a hard day at work, so I go to McDonald's drive-thru for breakfast. I have a tough meeting late morning. I go through the Burger King drive-thru and get some more fast food. Then it's finally lunchtime. I'm so stressed out and so anxious. I'll feel so much better if I just shovel all this food into my face. And then of course it's dinner time. Let's just pick up a pizza on the way home. Let's just round out the day because I'm so tired. I deserve this now. My coping mechanism my entire life was food. If you're happy, you eat. If you're sad, you eat. If you're bored, you eat. That's what I did. My whole family did. And so when he said that to me, and I realized that a multi-billion-dollar bank basically told me, you're making such poor decisions in your life that we are taking away access to your own money. That was the moment where I couldn't blame anybody else for what was going on. I was so good at blaming everybody else and saying, this is not my fault. This is somebody else's. Who can I blame for this? It was always outgoing, outward focused. And for whatever reason, Natalie, on that day, I could not find someone else to blame. And it became something for myself where I said, wow, this is really a lack of me taking responsibility for my life. And so I started, and then nothing changed overnight. That just kind of got me thinking. And of course, there was a lot of shame and a lot of self-judgment. It wasn't this liberating moment for me. I haven't been taking personal responsibility. This is amazing. There was none of that at all. It was just a deep shame spiral of what I had done to myself and what I was doing to myself. But that began the quest for me because I saw there were people in my life, people very close to me, who had been through trauma that I couldn't even fathom. I mean, way, way worse stuff than I had ever been through. And yet they seemed to be able to navigate life a lot more effectively than I did. And so I started kind of reverse engineering that. And that's how I got into personal growth and started reading these books and getting coached and having these transformations for myself. But it was that moment where I really had this kind of light shown in my face that I just wasn't taking personal responsibility for the choices that I was making.
And it is so true, Jason, because the amount of people that say, that they're almost controlled by circumstance, situation, external, and they do feel that they don't have a choice. They don't have that responsibility. And when you actually do go, do you know what? This is my life. I get one. Yes. It's that realization. It's so effective in the end. But what a story! how that actually impacted on you and how you changed. Thank you for the question, Natalie. Great question. Kate, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think it's a question. I'm just I'm loving this. So thanks, Lorraine, for introducing Jason. Jason, adore you. I mean, it's this whole thing. Too. Yeah. When you use the word sort of the fact that it's prison break and there's this piece about being a prisoner, I can understand it when we're talking about an external influence and that actually looking at the way that maybe someone's reacting and saying, well, hang on a sec, where may they be coming from? But I suppose sort of based on what you've just said and what's in my mind as well is that one prisoner feels like I'm out of control. I have been put in a cage or, and I am not responsible for that. So, and that might be because I just need to read your book. But that was an interesting term for me. And so it was like, how does that work? And how do you then take the accountability so you get yourself out of that shame spiral, which I really empathize with? And how do you then change the voices in your head when you're the only internal, it's internal, it's not an external influence. It might be the same story you've been telling yourself for years. It might be that piece. And actually that's really difficult to whilst identify. I'm sure actually probably coming to you as a coachee would help. But are there any tips or tricks that you have to get in your own head and start to change that and therefore feel like you're not a self-imposed, well, you are a self-imposed prisoner. I hope that all makes sense.
It all makes
Great
total
question.
No, yeah, it makes fantastic sense. So here's the thing. It's I go back to this all the time. So does anybody here have sons, little boys, or had little boys at some point? Now they're older. Okay, yeah, all right, cool. So and there's a few guys here. So guys, if you've ever done this, I need you to back me up, because if not, this is going to be very vulnerable, and I'm just going to feel a little weird. And I don't know if this has ever happened to the women who have sons here, but I'm going to give you a quick example. So I was raised by a single mother. Only child, single mother, single Jewish mother, so she can hear everything we're saying right now, wherever she is. And half of you are probably on the payroll. So it was always just me and mom, always. And I was a pretty well-behaved kid. So I was like the little kid you could take to the adult parties, and I would just kind of like move around and talk to adults and like not cause too much trouble. So when we would go to the mall together, we go shopping, my mom wouldn't like hold my hand when I was a little boy. She knew that like I'd pretty much stick by her and I'd be well-behaved. But there was one day in particular where we went to a department store, and she wasn't holding my hand, and she was looking around at whatever she was looking around at. And I kind of ventured off. I don't know how old I was, maybe 6 years old or something. I kind of venture off, and I find the women's clothing section. And in the women's clothing section, there happens to be a mannequin. And said mannequin happens to be wearing a dress. And as a little enterprising, curious little boy, I decide to walk up and look up the mannequin's dress, and just kind of that was my thing. And as I did that, my mom realized I wasn't standing by her anymore, looked around, and is mortified that her son is looking up the dress of a mannequin. Now, all of you are laughing. She was not laughing. Immediately, she ran over and grabbed my arm, not like viciously, but grabbed my arm and like wanted to get me out of there. She was completely embarrassed. And to her, what I had just done was a reflection on her as a parent. Now, she has had this serious relationship with what I just did because I'm her son. And now it means that she's not a good parent. She's not paying attention to her kid. Her kid is not well behaved. Her kid is some kind of sexual deviant in the making. Whatever it is that she thinks people are thinking, she has now taken it on and has a very serious relationship with what I just did. Contrast that with any of you who would have also been in the mall and seen this happen, and your response would have been laughing. You would have looked at it and said, oh my God, look at that little boy. He's so curious and so adorable. Look at him. He's looking up the skirt. How funny is that? Or you may have seen my mom come over mortified and said, oh my God, that woman raising the kid all by herself. I have so much compassion for her. Same exact situation. But because you didn't have a serious relationship with what I was doing, because what I was doing didn't feel like a reflection on you, because you had a casual relationship with the scene that you were seeing, you were able to process it in an entirely different way. So when we look at the thoughts that are in our own head, it's the exact same thing. If I take that thought seriously and I say, oh my God, that means something about me. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not connected enough. I don't have enough money. I'm not cut out for this. The fact that I have a serious relationship with that means that my brain has to do what it does. And what brains do is they find any evidence they can to back up the belief you're taking seriously. Okay. So if I start practicing having a more casual relationship with my thinking, then it's almost like if you think about a snow globe. Does everybody know what a snow globe is? Like the thing you shake up? And yeah, you've seen this before. So the other thing I love besides socks are snow globes. I know I'm probably going to be on the news for something really weird at some point. The fact that I love socks and snow globes, but I love snow globes. They're super cool. But the reason I love snow globes is because they're so representative to me of the human experience. Because if you take one of these snow globes, and I have several of them, but you take one of these snow globes, and let's say you have a snow globe where there's like a little person standing in the middle, and you shake it up, and the snow is going everywhere, you can't even see the person anymore, right? The person disappears because it's just a white cloud of smoke. And that's what it feels like for us when we're inside the snow globe, and our minds, like you were saying here, Kate, our minds go crazy, and the thoughts are just racing all the time. We can't even see our hand in front of our face. It just feels like the world is just spinning around us and our thoughts are going crazy. Now, what we think we need to do when we have a serious relationship with our thinking is that we think that every piece of snow, which represents every thought and every instant and every person and every whatever that we're going through, we think it is our responsibility to take each piece of snow and put it on the floor. Right? If we can just figure out a way to get every single thought under control and just put it on the floor so it's all on the ground again, then we'll be able to see clearly again. But what actually happens when we do that? If you actually were to do that and grab every piece of snow and be running all around the snow globe trying to get each one and put it on the ground, as you're doing that, you're kicking up all the snow that you just put on the ground as you're running around going frantic. That's one way to try to deal with the snow globe when it's shaken up. But there's another way you can do it as well. What do you actually have to do if you want the snow in a snow globe to go to the ground? Nothing. You kind of just, you put it on the counter and you take a step back and you watch it, and the natural system will start to calm that down, because I no longer think I am responsible for every single piece of snow. That's what having a casual relationship with our thoughts looks like. It says, oh my God, I'm so sped up right now, and my natural inclination is I got to control everything. I'm type A, I got to figure this out, I got to figure that out, I got to react, I got to panic, I got to stress. That's one way to do it. I'm not saying it's not a way to do it. Potentially more effective way of doing it is taking a step back and saying, listen, there's nothing I've been through that I haven't gotten through, because I'm here right now. So the evidence I have is that time and taking a step back can play a huge role in me getting back to center. So sometimes it's less about actually breaking out of the prison and more about realizing the more you stand there, the more you start realizing the prison was never there to begin with. Does that make sense?
Again, that's blown, yeah. So spot on. Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad that was helpful. Thanks for that question, Kate.
And again, you know, Jason, one of the things, you know, I talked with someone earlier, we don't get taught this stuff. You know, at school, you know, we get conditioned. I use the word conditioned a lot. You know, parenting conditioning, educational conditioning, societal conditioning, work conditioning. And, you know, we never really get told what is really right from wrong, or what is so-called perfectionism. And again, that was the great module on it, you know, don't be perfect because it's just not cool. You know, so actually, you know, we become this version of, actually, it's not even us. We're living in this bubble that we haven't even, you know, that was created for us. And so when you do take a step back and actually look at you as an individual and what is kind of really important, and the reason why you are alive and why you want to become whatever it is, you do start to really reflect. And obviously lockdown is being an opportunity for some, not everybody, because the people that have had to work, but for some people they've had to really push the pause button. And that's where the magic has happened. Because that's where the magic happened for me doing your course, because I stopped, I took my foot off the gas, I can't speak, foot off the gas, and actually it was like, this is okay, Lorraine. You know, everyone is in the same situation. It is a very uncertain time for so many people, and that in itself is causing us to feel slightly agitated or slightly stressed or frustrated or angry. And it's okay. It's recognizing it. So, you know, I love how snow globes are one of my favorite things too. I'm not sure whether socks are, but I do have fancy socks on today.
Well, and not everybody's perfect, Lorraine. I'm sorry. I'm
just gonna go and buy some flash socks now and say that I'm one of the cool kids.
You know, it's funny. You know, one other thing that I'd love to share here, because we were talking earlier with Linus's great question about how do you like develop this resilience, and then we started talking about increasing your level of consciousness and all these different things. And there's a tool that I want to share with you guys, and it's funny. It was something I developed after I wrote the book, so it didn't even make it in the book. It's in Playful Prosperity, so you would have probably seen it, Lorraine. Is prison break questions, what I call PBQs, prison break questions. And prison break questions are questions that take something that it feels like a problem, and instead of solving the problem, it makes the problem no longer problematic, right? So for example, if you're walking through like the desert and you see like a coiled up snake and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. The snake's going to bite me. Like my life's going to be over. I'm going to rot and decompose out here in the desert. No one's ever going to find me. And then all of a sudden you look a little closer and you see that it's actually a coiled up piece of rope. You're done. There's no more work to be done. You don't then go to a coach and say, I really need to work on my rope consciousness. I feel like there's something I think I have some rope stories that I need to overcome. Like you just don't do that. The work is over, right? So sometimes instead of trying to fix the problem, making the problem no longer problematic is an even quicker way to move past it. And so that's why I created prison break questions. So prison break questions, there are as many prison break questions as there are people and situations. They're totally a creative endeavor, but there is a kind of a format to it. And the format essentially looks like this. It goes, if I knew, what would I do? Right? If I knew, what would I do? If I knew this thing to be true, how would I show up different? How would I respond different? What would I do that's different? And so I'm saying all this to say, when we're in a low state of consciousness, I have a PBQ that I created for myself one day when I was just feeling in such despair and so stressed out. This is probably 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. I was still living on the East Coast of the US. I was living in North Carolina. I live in Los Angeles now. I was living in North Carolina back then. And I just had this, oh my God, this day was just so heavy and so stressful. And I was trying the reframing, and I was trying all the things that I had taught and that I had learned, and none of it was working. And I knew I had already created PBQs, and I'm like, well, maybe let me just try a PBQ because nothing else is working and I'm suffering, and I got to do something. Let's try this. So the PBQ that I came up with was, if I knew that this feeling of despair, sadness, depression, whatever it is, if I knew that these feelings were going to magically disappear in 10 minutes, right? Like literally, no matter what I do, in 10 minutes and 1 second, everything I feel was just going to disappear. If I knew that all of these things were going to disappear in 10 minutes, how would I treat myself for the next 10 minutes? If I knew this stuff was going to magically disappear in 10 minutes, how would I treat myself for the next 10 minutes? And when I asked myself that question, the answer was immediate. It was, wow, I would be way more gentle on myself. I would stop trying to force these things to go away now because like, they're going to be gone in 10 minutes. I can hold out for 10 minutes. I'd be a lot kinder to myself. I'd be a lot more compassionate to myself. And as soon as I answered that question, the problem of trying to get rid of my heavy thoughts went away. It was no longer problematic because in 10 minutes, they're going to be gone. Now, can we know they'll actually be gone in 10 minutes? Absolutely not. But that small shift actually made those things disappear in about 7 minutes because I wasn't taking them so seriously anymore. I wasn't spending any energy. And this is something I want everybody to get here. I don't want any of you, and myself included, everything I'm saying to you, I'm saying to me. I don't want any of you to spend any time or energy trying to believe or trying to fight off whatever it is you're feeling. Because all of this stuff is transient. It's only when the thought comes through and we grab onto it and we say, you're my new dolly and I'm going to brush your hair and take you everywhere. Tell me how fat and stupid I am and how I'll never amount to, and the doll's like, I don't even like you. I just wanted to like pepper some shit on you and run. And then you'd forget about me. Why are you holding on to me? So when I can be in this place of saying whatever I'm feeling, if it were going to disappear on its own in 10 minutes, how would I show up for the next 10 minutes? That increases your level of consciousness and you will see solutions to other things going on in your world that you would have never seen when your sole focus was trying to overcome these heavy feelings. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I hope it does.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things I was having a conversation with someone the other day was, what are these thoughts that are in your mind? What is it that you're constantly saying to yourself? And obviously it was things like, I don't feel beautiful, I feel fat, the typical women things that we would say. And I said, would you say those things to your best friend? Mm. And they were like, no. And I went, so why are you saying it to yourself? Yep. And they were like, because that's what I see. And I went, is it what you see? And it is kind of, just sometimes by actually talking and saying these words out loud to somebody else, our brain or our mind can make sense of it in a better way too. It's when it's in here, just going round and round and round and not making any sense that we're beating ourselves up. And some people I say, just write it. If you can't talk it, just write it and look at it. And actually, is that a true representation of you? Or are they just things that you have a perception of from somewhere? And so exactly that. I love the doll. Again, you have such a great way of like making things so easy and simple to translate. I love it. I really do love it.
Well, I mean, that's for me. I learn better in story and metaphor. I don't learn as well when people say, here's a 5-step process to be happier. That's like, I don't want to pull out a laminated sheet every time I want to be happy. Like I want it to just be something I can really embody for myself. There's nothing wrong with lists and all that stuff. But if I know in my heart that like my resistance to what I'm feeling is keeping the thing here longer, that's a big shift for me, right? Like if you walk up to a stranger on the street, and be careful what kind of a stranger you do this with, especially during COVID. This is actually, don't do what I'm about to tell you right now, actually at all right now. But pre-COVID, if you walked up to a stranger and said, hey, can I touch your hand? Right now, that would be like they would run away screaming and call the cops. But back in the day, you could do this, and people would say, I guess so. And you tell them to put their hand up in the air like this, and then you take your hand and you put it against their hand and you press. Without you saying anything, they're going to press back. Without you saying a thing, if you just press against somebody's hand, they'll press back, because resistance is our natural thing. Anytime something pushes against us, we think we need to push back. The sooner we are not in resistance to what it is that we are feeling or thinking, the sooner it's okay that we're having this experience of life, whether it's a negative thought or a heavy thought or a heavy experience or whatever it is, the sooner we let go of the resistance, the faster it passes along. This is why this PBQ of, if I knew it was going to be gone in 10 minutes, how would I show up differently? That's telling your ego, the ego side of your brain, hey, you don't need to be resistant to this. It's kind of not here for good anyways. And when you realize that, it's so helpful. And there's another piece of this puzzle. I had a dear friend of mine who's also a coach, and he said this thing one time that blew my mind. We have this like small mastermind together, and he said this thing blew my mind. He said, all fears are fears of feelings. All fears are fears of feelings. And I want you to really think about that, because if I wasn't afraid of feeling sad, if I wasn't afraid of feeling not enough, if I wasn't afraid of being alone, if I wasn't afraid of my business failing, if I wasn't afraid of all these things, I'd be fine. If I wasn't afraid of my feelings. So then what do you do with that? Do you say like, I love my feelings? No, I wouldn't tell you to do that either, because that's one of those fake reframing things. But when I can see a thought come in, and I do this myself, when I have a feeling of sadness come in, or some memory comes in that makes me feel sad in a moment, I literally will talk to that thing and say, listen, I'm not afraid of you. You're allowed to be here, right? There's this beautiful poem by this guy called Jeff Foster, and he talks about this thing where he's basically like having a conversation with his emotions. And sadness comes in, and sadness says to him, listen, I know you don't like me being here. I'll try to leave as soon as I can. I need to be here for a little while. And Jeff says to his feeling, he says, well, who told you you had to leave? Who told you you couldn't be here? And as soon as we start approaching our feelings that way, not being in resistance, but saying, it's fine. Happiness, you don't have to go. You don't have to stay. Sadness, you don't have to go. You don't have to stay. You're all free to do whatever you want. We notice that we're less affected. We're more grateful for the highs and more graceful with the lows when we're not taking that stuff so seriously and we're not in such resistance to what's showing up.
Fantastic. I'm very conscious of